The most dangerous alien warrior woman in the universe came to my home. Her reason shocked me. The wall of my kitchen disappeared before I even heard a sound. 1 second I was standing there with a bowl of cold noodles in my hand, and the next second the plaster and brick simply folded away into a bright seam of white light, as if someone had erased that part of my house with a giant hand. Dust fell, my smoke detector screamed, and through that glowing gap stepped a figure so large she had to bend her head to fit through the opening. I dropped the bowl. It shattered on the floor, but I did not even hear it break, because my ears were filled with the sound of my own heartbeat. I knew her face. Everyone in the settled worlds knew her face. It had been on emergency broadcasts, on warning channels, on the news feeds that every government on Earth watched with quiet dread. Her name was Cressa Dale, and among the stars she was called the Widow of 7 Fleets. It was said that she once walked into an enemy stronghold alone, and came out 3 hours later as the only living thing left standing on that entire base. Earth's Defense Council had a standing rule. If she is ever seen anywhere near our solar system, sound every alarm we have. And she was standing in my kitchen. She was easily 7 feet tall, with skin like dark bronze, and eyes the color of burning amber, no white in them at all, just gold from edge to edge. Her armor was black and fitted, plates moving over each other like a second skin, and along both of her forearms sat long blades that had folded halfway into her gauntlets, as though she had chosen, on purpose, not to draw them fully. I could not speak. I could not move. All I could think about was my little apartment, my ordinary life, and how none of it had prepared me for the most feared woman in the galaxy standing 3 feet away from my refrigerator. "Please," I finally said, my voice cracking in half. "I don't have anything. I don't know anything. I just fix appliances for a living. Whatever you're looking for, it's not here." She tilted her head at me, the way a person does when they hear something confusing. Then, without any warning at all, the blades on her arms slid fully back into their housings, with 2 quiet clicks, and she lowered herself down onto one knee, in the middle of my kitchen floor. It was not the movement of someone about to attack. It was something else. Something that looked almost like respect. "Human," she said, and her voice was low and rough, but careful, like she was choosing each word with effort. "I have traveled across 11 star systems to find this address. My last working engine burned out getting me here. I have come to ask something of you, and by the old rules of my people, I must ask it kneeling." "Ask what?" I whispered. "I don't understand any of this." 3 years ago," she said, "by your calendar, my transport ship was struck during a survey mission near a mining colony called Varen's Edge. Our reactor cracked. 209 of my crew were trapped inside a dying hull, sealed behind broken doors, with less than an hour of air between all of them. The colony's safety systems had already marked our ship for controlled destruction, to stop the reactor from spreading damage to nearby structures." I felt my chest tighten, because something about this story already sounded impossible, and also somehow familiar. "A cargo hauler from your world broke away from the rescue line," she continued. "He had no weapon, no armor, no authorization, and no reason to believe he would survive what he was about to do. He cut through our outer hull by hand, using tools meant for loading freight, not saving lives. He carried my people out of that wreck one at a time, through corridors filled with sparks and freezing air, until his own oxygen supply ran out, and he collapsed beside the last person he pulled free." My mouth had gone completely dry. "His name was stitched onto the collar of his work jacket," she said. "Danny Okafor, registered under the trade fleet out of your northern hemisphere. I have spent every resource my house holds trying to learn what happened to him afterward." I sat down slowly onto one of my kitchen chairs, because my legs had simply stopped agreeing to hold me up. "That's my uncle," I said. "Danny is my uncle. He told us the shipping company he worked for went out of business, and that he retired early. He never said anything about rescuing anyone. He never said anything about aliens at all." "That does not surprise me," Cressa said, and something shifted in her expression, something almost gentle beneath all that armor and old battle scarring. "He refused every reward offered to him. My people tried to give him land, wealth, protection, even a place among our honored houses. He declined every single one. He vanished back into the ordinary crowd of your species, as though what he did meant nothing. That sounds exactly like him, I said, and a strange laugh escaped me, half disbelief and half pride. He's always been like that. Quiet. Never wants credit for anything. In my culture, Cressa said, a debt like this does not disappear because the one who is owed refuses payment. It simply passes forward. If he will not accept what is owed to him, then by our law, it falls to his family line. I searched every registry I could access until I found you. You are his closest living relative. I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. So you're here because of some kind of debt law? I am here, she said, rising slowly to her full height again. Because 209 lives continue, because one human chose to risk everything for strangers, he would never meet again. I have carried that weight for 3 years. I did not come to frighten you. I came to finally set it down. She reached toward a compartment on her belt, and I flinched without meaning to. She noticed, and stopped completely, holding both hands open and empty in front of her, palms up, in a gesture that needed no translation. I mean no harm to you, or to him, she said. I only wish to complete what my people call the closing of a debt. It usually involves gifts, protection, and a spoken promise of alliance. But more than any of that, I wish to say 2 words to him directly. I have practiced them in 7 different languages during the journey here, in case your language proved difficult for me. What words? I asked. Thank you, she said simply. That is all. He never allowed me the chance to say it before. I do not intend to leave your planet until I have said it to his face. I looked past her, through the still glowing seam where my kitchen wall used to be, and saw something enormous and dark hovering silently above the rooftops of my street, its shape barely visible against the evening sky. Somewhere out there, a dog was barking at it. Somewhere else, someone was probably already filming it on their phone. This is really happening, I said quietly, mostly to myself. It is, Cressa said, and I understand this is a shock to you. I would ask for your help in finding him, and your permission to speak with him. I will not act without your agreement, since you are the one standing before me, and I did not wish to appear at his home directly and risk frightening him without warning first. That, more than anything else, convinced me she was telling the truth. A being capable of ending wars alone was standing in my destroyed kitchen, asking politely for permission. He lives 2 towns over, I said. He has a small garden. He grows tomatoes. He complains about his knees. He is the least dramatic person you will ever meet, and he is going to be so annoyed that you tracked him down. Something in her face changed again, and this time it was unmistakably a smile, small and surprised, as if she had forgotten her own face could still make that shape. Good, she said. Annoyed men make honest company. Will you take me to him? I stood up, my legs still shaking slightly, and nodded. Let me grab my jacket, and maybe explain to my neighbors why there's a hole in my kitchen wall before we go. She glanced at the hole, then back at me, almost sheepish. I can repair that before we leave, if you allow it. You can repair walls too? My people can repair many things, she said. Walls, ships, debts that others have tried to forget. She raised one hand toward the broken wall, and thin strands of light spread from her palm across the gap, weaving brick and plaster back together, as though she were stitching fabric. Within a minute, my kitchen wall stood whole again, seamless, with not even a crack to show what had happened. My smoke detector finally stopped screaming. Useful, I said, staring at the wall in disbelief. Practical, she corrected. Now, will you guide me to your uncle, or would you prefer I follow at a distance, so as not to alarm your neighbors further? I almost laughed at the idea of a 7-foot armored alien trying to walk casually down a suburban street without alarming anyone. Let's take my car. You can sit in the back. Try not to break the seats. I will attempt restraint, she said, and I realized, with some surprise, that she was capable of humor too. The drive to my uncle's house took 20 minutes, and it was the strangest 20 minutes of my life. Cressa sat folded into my back seat, her head nearly touching the roof, watching the passing streets with quiet, careful attention, as though she were memorizing every detail of an ordinary human evening. Streetlights flickering on. Children riding bicycles home before dark. A man walking his dog. She watched all of it, like it was the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. "Your world is very calm," she said at one point. "It doesn't feel calm most days," I said. "But I guess compared to what you've seen, maybe it is." "Compared to what I have seen," she said quietly, "very few places are calm. That is part of why I wish to see it myself. I wanted to understand what kind of place raised a man who would give his own life for strangers without hesitation. I did not have an answer for that, so I just kept driving. When we finally pulled into my uncle's narrow driveway, I saw him exactly where I expected, kneeling in his front garden in old work gloves, pulling weeds from around his tomato plants, completely unaware that the most feared warrior in known space was about to step out of my car. "Wait here a second," I told Cressa. "Let me talk to him first. If I bring you up to him without warning, he might have a heart attack." She nodded once, staying seated, watching through the window as I walked up the path toward him. "Danny," I said, and my uncle looked up, squinting against the evening sun. "Hey, kid. Didn't expect you tonight. Everything all right?" "Not exactly," I said, glancing back toward my car. "I need you to stay calm, and I need you to trust me, because something happened today that's going to sound impossible." He set down his gardening tools slowly, studying my face. My uncle had always been sharp, even in his quiet moments, and he could tell immediately that something serious was happening. "What kind of impossible?" he asked. "Do you remember Varen's Edge?" I asked. "The mining colony job, years ago, before the company folded?" His face changed instantly. All the color drained from it, and his hands, still holding his gardening gloves, went completely still. "How do you know about that?" he asked quietly. "I never told anyone about that job, not even your mother." "Because someone came looking for you," I said. "Someone from very far away. Someone who says you saved over 200 lives that day." He stood up slowly, brushing dirt from his knees, his eyes fixed somewhere past me, toward my car, where the passenger door was now opening. Cressa stepped out slowly, deliberately, careful to move without any sudden motion, her hands visible and open at her sides. Even so, my uncle took a step back, his breath catching audibly. "It's all right," I said quickly. "She's not here to hurt anyone. She's here because of what you did." Cressa stopped several steps away, giving him space, and lowered herself down onto one knee in the middle of his front garden, exactly as she had done in my kitchen. "Danny Okafor," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly beneath it. "You may not remember my face, since you never saw it clearly through the wreckage that day, but I remember yours. You were the last thing many of my crew saw before losing consciousness, and the first thing they saw again when they woke up in safety." My uncle stood frozen, staring at her, his mouth slightly open, no words coming out. "I have searched for you for 3 years," she continued. "Not to reward you, though I still wish to offer that. Not to burden you, though our laws demand I try. I searched for you simply because I never had the chance to say the 2 words I owed you the moment I regained consciousness in that medical bay, surrounded by survivors who would not exist if not for your choice that day." "I don't understand," my uncle said finally, his voice shaking. "I didn't save anyone important. I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Cressa said firmly, shaking her head. "You did what almost no one would have done, even among my own warriors, trained since childhood for sacrifice. Very few would have broken formation, alone, unarmed, for strangers of another species entirely. You did not know if we were friend or enemy. You only knew we were dying, and that was enough for you to act." My uncle sat down heavily on the small bench near his garden, as though his legs had given out from beneath him, much like mine had earlier that evening. "I thought about it every day afterward," he admitted quietly. "I never knew if any of you made it. The company shut everything down right after, sealed all the records, told us to never speak of it again. I figured I'd never know what happened to any of you." 209 of us made it," Cressa said, "because of you. 209 lives, and every child born to them since, and every child those children will one day have. All of it traces back to the choice you made in less than a minute, without hesitation, without asking what you would gain from it." Tears were now visible on my uncle's face, and he wiped at them roughly with the back of his gloved hand, embarrassed, the way older men often are about showing emotion in front of others. "I don't need anything from you," he said. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know," Cressa said. And finally, she said the words she had traveled across 11 star systems to deliver. "Thank you. For my life, and for the lives of everyone I brought home that day. Thank you." The garden was quiet after that, except for the sound of birds settling into nearby trees, and a car passing somewhere down the street, completely unaware of what was happening on this ordinary front lawn. My uncle finally stood, walked over to where Cressa still knelt, and extended his hand toward her, the simplest human gesture he had, offering it without hesitation, despite everything he now understood about who she was and what she was capable of. She looked at his hand for a long moment, as though studying an unfamiliar custom, then reached out and took it gently in her own, careful not to apply even a fraction of her actual strength. "You're welcome," my uncle said simply. "I'm glad you made it home." Cressa rose to her feet, still holding his hand a moment longer than strictly necessary, and something about the exchange felt final, like a weight that had been carried across the stars had finally been set down safely on solid ground. "There is more I wish to offer you," she said. "Protection for your family line, access to medical advances your world will not develop for generations, a place of honor among my people, should you ever wish to see the stars yourself." My uncle smiled, shaking his head slowly. "I appreciate all that, I really do. But I'm happy with my garden and my tomatoes. Maybe just visit sometime. Tell me how everyone's doing. That would mean more to me than any of that other stuff." Cressa studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That, I can certainly do." Over the following months, she kept that promise. She returned quietly, without the dramatic entrances of that first evening, usually arriving late in the evening after most of the neighborhood had gone inside, sitting with my uncle on his porch, while he told her about his tomatoes, and she told him small, careful stories about the 209 lives that continued because of him, about children born, about names given in his honor that he never asked for, and always seemed embarrassed to hear. I sat in on a few of those evenings myself, listening to stories that no history book on Earth would ever record, watching the most feared warrior in the known universe laugh quietly at my uncle's terrible gardening jokes, and I found myself thinking that maybe the universe was not always about power, or fear, or danger. Sometimes, it was simply about a debt of gratitude, carried carefully across the stars, until it finally found its way home.